Hey everyone, this is Zach Ditmarsh for Fish Talk Magazine. Thanks for tuning in for another installment of Live with Lenny. Tonight we're going to be talking about striped bass in 2024 and cuts in the catch. So there's a number of options on the table for the 2024 striped bass regs. And as soon as they'll be open for the for public comment, we'll share some slides with you later this evening. Let's take a look at what's happening with the fall rockfish fishery right now, what might happen in 2024, and what we can do as the voice of Chesapeake Bay recreational anglers. So stick around for Live with Lenny. Just a moment. Thanks again, guys, for tuning in. This is Zach Ditmarsh here. Before we get started tonight, I want to thank everyone for participating in our Fish for a Cure team, Prop Talk Fish Talks, Fish for a Cure fundraiser this year. We hit our goal of 10,000 thanks to our generous donors. We had tremendous support from local Chesapeake Bay companies such as Ebbtide Charters, Old School Tackle Company, Hardhead Custom Baits, Imperium Outfitters, BKD's, High Acton Custom Baits, Wayne Young, one of our Fish Talk contributing writers, and numerous other ones, especially Eric Packard. Got to give him really a tremendous thank you for all his contributions year after year. And we have so many other people. Oh, not to mention Hook Optics over there on the Eastern Shore. Just so many contributors, donors, year after year. And we really appreciate the continued support. We still are doing our fundraiser now through Saturday. You can make a generous donation, tax deductible, fishtalkmag.com/fish for a cure. The auction had yesterday, and we have tons of great stuff for people to pick up, and we couldn't have done it without y'all, so we appreciate it. Isn't that right, Lenny?
Hey, you forgot one.
Who's that?
We want to make sure we mention Beltway International. They're local. They're right in Baltimore, and actually they got locations throughout the state of Maryland, and they've been big supporters for several years now. So I know it's not a fishing tackle company, so it probably wasn't foremost in your mind, but we do got to mention Beltway and thank them too.
Absolutely. And also, we did not mention Bryan Point Outfitters, which has been generous to donate a guided goose hunt every year we've done Fish for a Cure for the past half a decade or so. That is the only item in our live auction that did not get bid on, which is very strange because it was a very hot item in the past.
It's bizarre.
And what's different about this year's regs is that there is no break. There is no split in the goose season. It's 6 weeks, I think, from December to January, and it's 2 geese per person. So that's pretty good hunt, you know?
That's pretty fantastic. And you and I have hunted there before. And did we see any geese?
Birds galore. I mean, I don't think we were only out there 2 hours. I don't know. We can limit it out. So
it is prime goose hunting territory. They have got thousands of birds coming and going there. For those who don't know, it's located right off of Prospect Bay. So it is absolutely prime territory. You get to hunt with Bri. That's always fun. He's always fun to be around. And we had put a minimum bid on there of $800. Gosh, for 4 people, that's what, $200 a head?
Yeah, that's $100 a bird when you limit out.
I'm not good at math, but I'm pretty sure that's correct. So we're going to do something a little different since this one didn't sell, right? And we're going to reopen the bidding on this for the duration of tonight's Live with Lenny. At the end of the night, anybody who pops in a number, $800 or higher, building up from there, is going to get that hunt. We're going to leave it on the table until the end of tonight's show. So do I hear $800? $800? Come on, $800. Do I hear $800? The man in the corner over there. Come on, $800. Let's see it, people. Just pop it right into the comments. Put in there a number. And for the hunt at Bryan Point Outfitters, and you are going to do some seriously cool goose hunting.
All right. Well, you have about 55 minutes to mull that over. We'll bring this back up at the end of the tonight, and hopefully someone will jump on it.
Until then, are we ready to talk rockfish?
Let's do it.
I have the feeling that it's going to be a little contentious tonight. I'm going to ask everybody to keep their comments in check, please, people. Let's keep it all reasonable and polite. But As always, we do want to hear your comments. Please plug them into the box. Please toss in your questions. We'll try and get them answered as best we can. I'm going to admit right up front, I'm not the expert on the regulations and the politics of it all and how that stuff works. I'm forced to be immersed in it quite a bit, but I'm not the expert. Now, fortunately, we do have some folks who know a lot better than me watching tonight. I believe Dave Sikorsky is going to be tuning in. So he has a much better handle on exactly how some of this is going to work. But the bottom line is the options for 2024 have been published. So now at least we know what we can pick and choose from as we give our input. Before we talk about that, let's talk a little bit about the fishery and what's actually going on right now. So, Zach, you want to go ahead and pop up slide number 1?
Absolutely.
So slide number 1 is kind of your standard issue rockfish. That's normally what we're catching left and right at this time of year. That's my buddy Jeff right there. We call him Instant because when you call him to say, hey, you want to go fishing, he is there in an instant. And this fish was from last year. That was not this year's fish. We went fishing about a week ago, not even a week ago, over the weekend. And honestly, it was pretty dismal. I think what we caught maybe a half a dozen rockfish. We didn't box any. We let them all go. But it really was not what you would expect for a normal October. Zach, can you please go ahead to the next slide? There he is, the man himself, Zach Ditmars, holding up the biggest fish of the day the other day. And something really weird is going on with the fishery when Zach consistently catches the biggest fish of the day. And I think he did like the last 3 trips in a row. So no offense, Zach, but I think something strange is going on. Anyway, these 22, 23-inch fish, there are some around. They are in relatively short supply compared to normal. What's really weird is that I have not seen them doing this. Zach, go ahead and take us to slide number 3, please, because this is what we're all looking for in October. This is normal, right? You get big flocks of birds over schools of fish that are working bait. I have seen this exactly one time this fall, and it lasted for about 15 minutes, and there wasn't half as many birds. I have not been over Eastern Bay recently, but I know from talking to other folks who have been, as soon as 3 birds get within a mile of each other, 800 boats all go racing over, and it's done. And that's kind of the situation we're left with right now. So if you want to go out and catch some fish this weekend, next weekend, whatever, it's great if you can find working birds, but I would not plan a trip around chasing birds right now. It's going to be really tough to make that happen. Now, there have been decent numbers of fish on structure, some of the reef sites in the Middle Bay. There have been some up north. There have been some down south. The Potomac has been kind of a highlight. So if you're, within shooting distance of the Potomac, you might want to run up the Potomac a little bit. But I wouldn't plan on looking for birds. I mean, again, certainly I've got the binoculars on the boat. I'll be swinging them around and looking, but I'm not going to plan on finding them. What we have seen recently is, I'm not even going to call them schools, more like pods or tight groups of rockfish that are sitting right down on bottom. I'm talking about the kind of marks on the meter where if you're not looking, you might not see them. And these little pods have been right down on bottom, and you might see some birds just kind of flying around in the area, and then you might see them group up very briefly, 30 seconds, a minute, and then disperse. Well, head for that area and then look on your meter. Don't expect to find the big giant, churning water. That's not likely right now. But if you see those birds kind of gather and do some dipping in a particular area, go to that area, mill around. You may be able to spot them on the meter. Keep a sharp eye on that meter. And when you see them, immediately shift into neutral and get your stuff down. This time of year, I'm normally fishing plastics. Excuse me. I did notice the other day on the boat, one of the guys tied on a jigging spoon, and he got down there faster than everybody else, and he immediately got a fish on. Now, it pulled free, but, such is life. Those of us throwing the plastics, we didn't get that hit. So it might be time to consider moving to a jigging spoon a little earlier than normal, just so you can get down fast and get to those fish. All right, Zach, you want to go ahead and take us to the next one, please? Here's the good news. These guys, these black sea bass, are all over the dang place. We're hearing about keepers being caught at the Bay Bridge on the pilings, at the rock piles. We're hearing about them at literally every reef site, Cedarhurst, Tillman, the Gooses, you name it. They're all holding fish. They're at the Stone Rock as well. The big challenge with them is not catching them. You can catch big numbers of these fish right now. The big challenge is finding the keepers. Normally, I've been finding like a 1 to 10 ratio, throwbacks to keepers. I know some guys have been finding fish in areas where they're doing better than that. And these fish do get a little bit of finicky depending on the time of day and the tide. I know I fished a spot last weekend and did not get a keeper. And we only got a handful of throwbacks. And then literally 2 days later, guy fishing the same spot got 5 keepers there. So dang it for me, but good for him. And you got to recognize that, if you sit there at one of these reef sites and you're not catching fish, you probably ought to just move, head for another one. There might be a completely different bite. What are you going to fish for them with? My favorite right now has been a 1 ounce rain minnow. And then I take a little chunk of Fish Bites crab flavor and stick it on there. And that does the trick. Some guys do like using the squid. We did try using squid side by side with Fish Bites a couple weeks ago, and we came up with like a 50-50 ratio. So personally, I don't think it makes a bit of difference. And you know what? I'm not real fond of those squid stains that get all over the darn boat. But this is a great option right now. It's one you can do, really anywhere from the bridge south. I've heard of some farther north too, but not within the last week or two. So I hesitate to say, the farther northern areas are still holding them, but certainly from the bridge south, anywhere you go, you are going to find these fish. Recently, the hot zone has been kind of like the 18 to 24 foot zone. And I also want to point out, when you drop down that baited jigging spoon, don't give it those crazy whips. You're not snap jigging for rockfish. The sea bass are not into that. What you want to do is touch bottom, raise your tip up 6 inches, hover it, give a gentle jig up and down, just a foot or two, and just give it gentle jigs about a foot off the bottom there. If you have spot lock, it's highly effective to spot lock over the structure, jig for like 5 minutes. As soon as the bite drop, when you go to a new spot with a sea bass, generally they don't move a whole heck of a lot. And when you go to a new spot, you tend to boom, 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 catch, catch, catch. And then after 5 or 10 minutes, it slows down. As soon as that happens, take off spot lock, let your boat drift back just like 10 yards. That's it. And then press lock again and do it again. You can certainly drift these areas. It's effective for getting bites. It's also highly effective for getting snags. So if you're going to just drift, you have to recognize you're going to snag on that structure quite a bit. You're going to lose some spoons, so bring some extras. I also do want to mention these sea bass have like really rubbery jaws, and treble hooks really get snagged up in there. They can be really tough to take out. And considering how many throwbacks you're going to encounter, it really is a good idea to use a single hook spoon. That's one of the reasons why I really like the rain minnow. They got 1 hook. So really, really good option. All right, Zach, let's go ahead to the next slide, please. And here we have a flounder. And full disclosure, I made a mistake when I set up the slides for tonight. This is actually one caught on a boat out of Ocean City. I just got mixed up when I saw the green shirt because I have a similar picture where I'm holding one. But there are a lot of these guys around right now. All these same reef sites are filled up with like 8 to 10 inchers. So there's another reason to get rid of the trebles and stick with the singles, because you're going to catch and release a lot of little baby flounder too while you're fishing for those sea bass. Matt's chiming in and saying, what color jigging spoons for black sea bass? So Matt, my favorite is the pinky. I really like the pink rain minnow, but I got to tell you, I was talking to LJ, the guy who makes them, the other day, and he swears that the blue is just the ticket right now. We did have someone using a blue the other day side by side with the pink. I don't think I noticed a heck of a lot of difference, honestly. I've also had days where silver has done quite well. So I'm starting to think that maybe the color is not as imperative as it might be with some other fisheries, but pink, blue, silver, certainly going to be good choices. And if you're not catching, try swapping them out, try mixing it up. One more thing I want to mention about the flounder. When you get down as far as the Patuxent, there are some keeper fish showing up. Down that way, they have seen some, barely keeper to 18, 19-inch fish. I've heard tell of some farther north. I haven't found them, and I don't have any specific intel on exactly where's, so I can't really speak to it. But I do know for sure that once you get down towards the mouth of the Pax, certainly in the Potomac, you can start seeing some keeper flounder as well. So that's pretty darn cool. All right, Zach, let's go ahead to the next slide. We skipped one. Oh, well. Okay, not a biggie. We did have one of a rockfish. Oh, there he is. Thank you, Zach. I did want to mention that as far as the rockfish go, your stock and trade 4 to 5 inch paddle tails, your 6-inch BKDs are, kind of they're the normal go-to lures for the fall. They're still getting hit. They're not a bad option right now. So I did want to make sure we work that in. Interesting side note, if you drop down the 5-inch paddle tail where the sea bass are, you're going to catch a lot fewer fish, but sometimes the keeper size ones, they will hit those. So it's not a bad idea if you're getting tons of throwbacks. It's not a bad idea if you got 3-4 guys on the boat for someone to drop down that paddle tail and just jig that guy, right there amongst the baited spoons. Will saying LJ gave him a 1-ounce blue rain minnow last night. Perfect. Yeah, it's LJ. He firmly is in the blue camp right now. And I've talked to other people who are fishing with him within the last few weeks, and they're going blue. Like I say, I love the pink. Who knows? Any given day, right? Who knows what's going to happen next? Buddy of mine was fishing a silver the other day. He caught the keepers, so it's little. I don't want to call it a toss-up because it's not a toss-up, but you just kind of never know. All right, so we got this rockfish thing going on. We all know changes are in store for 2024. I'm going to say that the vast majority of us would probably agree that the rock fishing is not as good as we would have hoped for this October. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that most of you would probably agree it wasn't last year and it wasn't the year before that either. I know that's certainly what I found. Can you find fish? Yeah, sure you can. But you're working harder to find them. Generally speaking, they're not in the same numbers as we're used to. They're certainly not generally in the same size class as we had in the fall, say, 6-8 years ago. And when you do find them, they're generally really sketchy. The flocks of birds, the schools of fish breaking water, when you do find them, it's like you can pretty much bet that as soon as a boat rolls up on them, they're going to disperse. When you have a number of boats chasing after the schools popping up and down, they're popping down really fast. They're coming up, but they're going down really fast. It's almost like they figured out that when they hear a propeller, it's time to quit churning water and get down deep. Doesn't mean you can't catch them. You can still find them on the meter. You can find them deeper. You can fish them deeper, even though a surface frenzy may have just ended. Quite often, you're going to spot those fish right down on bottom, and you'll catch them. They'll still bite. But why are we in this situation that we're in? Well, Zach, please put up the next very sad slide. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this. You've seen it. You've probably cried over it. This is the Juvenile Striped Bass Index. It basically is DNR's sampling of the baby rockfish out there year to year. 2023 was the 5th year in a row of horrid results. I mean, horrid. And 2023 was also like the lowest of those 5 years. And you got to dig way back in that chart to find a year when there were fewer baby rockfish swimming around out there. Now, everybody's got their own thoughts on why this is. When you talk to the scientists, you hear everything come up from weather conditions to water quality to blue catfish. I mean, it's just all over the place. And the bottom line is nobody really knows, Last winter, we did have really poor spawn conditions, but a couple years before that, we had pretty good conditions, and yet we still had a really lousy spawn. So it's really hard to say. On the bright side, we do know from history that we can have several bad years in a row, and it doesn't take a whole lot of big rockfish to have a really good year. You can have a really good spawn pop out of a relatively low population if you have all the right conditions. Will we get that again? Who the heck knows? It's very hard to say. Zach, go ahead and take us to the next slide, please. So, no, make it big. Come on, you cut yourself out. That's Zach again. Oh, that's not fair, Zach. He cut himself out. That is Zach on the same dang fishing trip. He's wearing the same clothes. You can see it between the two pictures. He not only caught the biggest fish of the day, he caught the smallest fish of the day. But catching fish like this has become comparatively rare. Now, the guys who fish white perch know this. I know it from doing my white perch fishing. You're going around in one of the rivers, one of the tribs. You're throwing perch pounders or little jigs, little stuff at riprap and piers trying to catch, 12-inch white perch. You catch an awful lot of 10 and 12-inch rockfish by accident. They're normally all over the darn place. Some days you catch more rock than you do perch, for gosh sakes. That's not going on right now. That is not going on. And my friend and neighbor Brian, who perch fishes religiously, I can't tell you how many times I bump into him when he's coming home from perch fishing, and I'm like, how'd you do? And he's like, caught a few perch, caught a couple little rockfish. It is just not what it should be. But before we go any further in this discussion, I think this is a great time to bring up the Bryant Point Outfitters hunt again, because Brian, my friend and neighbor, is the guy who is the guide. He will take you out there and do that hunt. So don't forget, people, just pop into the comments an $800 bid. This hunt could be yours, and the money goes to a fantastic cause. It goes to Fish for a Cure. It is supporting cancer patients at AAMC. It really helps those people out. If you're on the fence, please jump in there right now. Make a bid. Let's get this goose hunt sold. Let's help the folks who need help through Fish for a Cure. And you know what? You're going to have a great time. I absolutely guarantee it, because Brian's a great guy, and this is a phenomenal place to hunt. All right. I think it might be time to move on to the contentious part of the conversation and take a look at the options that are going to be on the table for the 2024 season. Before we put them up, Zach, I just want to make sure, do we have any questions or comments that we need to get up now? Because I think it's going to get crazy in a minute. Are we caught up? So Mike's saying, at what point do we shut it all down? I have my view, but interested in hearing others. I'm not sure that there's any answer to that, Mike. Now, I do know that the stock assessments show that there are more fish right now by a long shot, like twice as many as there were when the moratorium was opened. So it doesn't seem likely that, a complete shutdown is in the cards anytime soon. But Mike's pointing out we're still dependent on the last good year spawn. They're now 20 to 32-inch fish. That's what we're dependent on. Sadly, there's nothing backing them up. Yeah, that was the reason, or one of the reasons, why the ASMFC put that 31-inch cap on the fish coast-wide, up and down the coast for everybody, was to try and protect that last good spawn. Now, that was a really good spawn. There are still, good numbers of those fish out there. And we did have the big fish, for whatever reason, last winter decided to come into the bay and stay here. They basically overwintered here. It's happened before. Hopefully it'll happen again. Doesn't happen every year. Years ago, they used to all go to North Carolina. And then there was a long time period they wintered off Virginia Beach. Sometimes they stay way the heck out in the ocean. Sometimes they come up the bay. There's no telling where they're going to go or what they're going to do. But there is still, a decent pile of that particular class of fish out there. And like I say, that number is, by the ASMFC's estimations, still way higher than when the moratorium was removed. So, I'm not a fortune teller. I can't say what's going to happen next, but I would doubt that there's going to be a complete shutdown, unless things get a whole lot worse. Now, a lot of people would point out that climate change seems to be having an effect here. The fishery seems to be moving farther north, and the Chesapeake Bay historically is responsible for a huge proportion of the spawn. So, we're going to have to see what happens here. Dean's mentioning that they started declining significantly when the dolphins started showing up in numbers. Dean, locally it seems that way, but I got to disagree. And I'm saying that because I remember when I was a kid, we had the dolphins in the bay in good numbers. You go down to the chop tank, you'd always see them, like always. They didn't come up the bay for quite a while, and in recent years they have. In fact, last year I heard of some sticking around all winter long. But historically, when you look back over the long term, it's not that crazy for those dolphins to be in the bay. It's true they left for a while, but they were here way back when. So I'm not sure that it certainly could have a local effect. I'm not sure it's having the big effect. Gary's mentioning the blue cats and the snakeheads. I think if you talk to the scientists, they're really, really worried about the blue cats. The snakeheads maybe to some degree, but not quite so much, because they really do tend to stay in the fresher territories. But when the baby rockfish swim through, out of the spawning areas, and they swim through the Susquehanna, the Potomac, the Chop Tank, they have got a gauntlet of blue cats to run through at this point. There are a ton of those fish, a ton of them. It scares me how many I see. And the spots, I used to always fish the Patuxent for white perch and yellow perch, but perch fishing in the spring run. I used to always catch some cats, some channel cats, never a blue cat. The last few years, not only am I catching very few perch, I mean, last year I never had a good day. It was like, my big perch day last year on the packs might have been 5 fish. I never had a good day. And yet I was catching tons of blue cats on throwing shad darts with grass shrimp, and caught a 42-pounder one day. That 42-pounder sitting right there where the fish are coming up to spawn. He eats a lot of meat every day to stay alive. So that scares me too. The blue cats really, truly do scare me. They do. Tim's saying, why not make it mandatory to keep or kill blue cats or snakeheads caught? I know snakes is now a sport fish, but it's invasive. The answer to that, Tim, is the state can't tell you must kill something. So that's why they made the rule that you can release a snakehead where it is, but you can't keep one alive because they don't want to transport it. But they really can't say to anybody, you must kill. It goes against some people's ethics, and you know what? That's fair. Gary's mentioning, why don't we have commercial fishermen overfish blue cats? Gary, they're trying to crank that up. There's a lot of work being done on that right now. There is a thriving commercial fishery in the Potomac. It's begun in the upper bay, the Susquehanna zone. It's cranking up. There are some issues with legalities regarding processing. Processing is always an issue. But the bottom line is they are trying to crank that up. Now, that said, I saw an estimate not terribly long ago that basically it was like, in order to have a real dent, put a real dent in the blue cat population, we'd have to have like 10 times the commercial harvest. So I don't know if we'll get there, but the commercial guys are working on that. MR is mentioning bunker harvesting. That's certainly another issue. It's really more of a Virginia issue than a Maryland issue, which of course makes it a Maryland issue and an everybody issue. And that is a fight that goes back. It's another one that goes back to since I was a kid. And I'm sure before that. Every other estuary bay on the entire Atlantic coast, they don't harvest bunker. It's got to be kept out in the ocean. The Chesapeake is the last remaining one. Has been for a long time. I don't even remember when they pushed them out of Long Island Sound. It was a long time ago. And it would be great if that could be accomplished. That's an ongoing battle that I hope continues to be fought. And yeah, I hope they do push those boats out of the bay. They have an impact. There's no doubt. I calculated. I took the omega harvest limit and calculated it out by the average length of the fish, which I think was 8 inches. I forget what it was. Anyway, when you take the poundage and divide it by the average length of the fish, blah, 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 they get to harvest enough bunker to circle planet Earth 5 times. And I didn't make that up. You can go do the math. It's X metric tons, X average size. Figure it out. You can circle the Earth 5 times. Now, I'm not a scientist, but it just seems to me on the face of it that might be a little excessive. You know, maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, you can circle the Earth 5 times with those fish. Seems kind of crazy. Matthew saying it's a multifaceted problem that should have a multifaceted solution. Regulating the commercial fishermen can't be the only part of the solution. God, yes. That's absolutely correct. No question about it right there. Ooh, should we put up that scary thing? Wait a minute. Pedro saying, is it that the bay is getting saltier? I've been catching a lot of red drum, including a 50-inch a couple of weeks ago. First off, congrats on the 50-inch red drum. That's rocking cool. We did have a good red drum year. It's overall, when you look back over the last 10 years, I think there has been an increase. I don't think it's just salinity, because the salinity does go up and down. Right now, if you look at the eyesonthebay.net, and I just did this the other day, salinity in like the middle bay is pretty much average, and yet all those sea bass are up here. And there've always been some little sea bass around, but not bunches, not the numbers we have, and not keeper fish. Is it salinity, or is a lack of rockfish opening up a niche in the environment that those drum and the sea bass and other stuff are moving in to fill? We've had good spec years in recent years too. If you got less rockfish, you're going to have more something else. When I was a kid and we had no rockfish, it was bluefish. Bluefish ruled the Chesapeake. And I'm talking, you could go to Love Point and catch 5, 6, 8 pound bluefish all day long. That was a regular event. It wasn't bluefish this big like we've seen in recent years. And this year we had some bigger blues come up the bay. It was big blues. In the springtime, you get we used to call them tide runner blues. Racer blues. I'm sorry, it was racers. 15, 16 pound bluefish that were a big giant head and a long skinny body after the wintertime, April. And you could catch them all the way up at Love Point. There weren't a ton of them up that far, but they would come. And so, you know, it could be a niche difference thing. But salinity is, you know, we had it really high earlier this year. It's really right about average right now. So, you know, one of those many factors that goes into it. All right, you ready to slap that thing up, Zach? This is what everyone's waiting for. I know it is. Any thoughts about commercial harvest limits? Bill, that plays into the conversation. Hold tight for 1 sec. Go ahead, Zach. Put it up there. There it is. Here is the draft document for public comment. We have a lot of options here, right? A lot of options. So, option A, one fish at a minimum 18 minimum size with 2017 seasons. What? Wait, hold on. What? We could actually have one fish at 18 inches with 2017 seasons? Well, according to the statistics and the calculations, that actually fits in. Now, that's not going to happen. It's kind of a weird quirk of the way. You can see at the bottom it says approved CEs. That's conservation equivalency. To make a long story short, that's basically when the ASMFC says you got to do X, state of Maryland, and the state of Maryland says, how about if we do Y, because it has the same effect. And then they say, okay, why not? Well, that's something that has happened through the years, but Maryland kind of, oh man, I hate to sound judgmental, but they kind of used and abused the system and did all kinds of crazy conservation equivalencies. And Dave's saying that status quo, which on paper is equivalent to our current Maryland regs. So equivalent in the harvest, but it's not realistic right now. And it's well, wait a minute, Dave's saying again, but for DNR to actually implement those rules, they would have to cut commercial by 18%. Okay. Now, who knows? Maybe they'll do that. Doesn't seem incredibly likely. But there is on the table a 14.5% commercial cut, which does seem quite doable and plays into what we got down here below. Let's look at the options that are realistically what we're going to end up with. B1 through B4. The same thing about all of these is they have a 19-inch to a something-inch slot, to a 23, 24, 25, 26-inch slot. The season would remain the same as 2022, and you can see the overall reduction in the harvest change. RRM change, honestly, people, I don't even understand that. Dave, if you can tell us what RRM change is, that would be great. It's over my head, frankly, on this stuff. But these B options all give us this slot. Now, if you look down below, you've got options C1 and C2. Only 2 slot options, 19 to 23 and 19 to 24. Why is it so tight? Well, this goes into, dead discards, release mortality. Thank you for that, Dave. The C options retain what they call sector separation. Now, what that is in human people terms is that's when the charters get 2 and the recreationals get 1. Now, when they first started doing that, I came out strongly opposed to it. I don't think it's fair. And I'm going to point out, I have been beaten up over that by a lot of charter guys. I've been called anti-charter, which I am not. I love charter boats, for God's sakes. They get people fishing. I mean, come on, that's what I'm all about. But on the face of it, it just isn't fair when charters get 2 and everybody else gets 1. And if you look at the overall reduction here, if you look at option C2, a 19 to 24-inch slot, that gives an 11% reduction. If you look at a 19 to 24-inch slot with everybody getting 1 fish, that leads to a 15.9% reduction. So that's 6%. That's that's added on or cut out, depending on how you look at it, by having the 2 fish, 1 fish thing. Now, recreational anglers watching this show right now, I love you, people. I'm one of you. I got to tell you, if you think that you catch half as many fish as the charter guys do, you're fooling yourself, okay? And most folks who've been on charters or worked on charters, they know this. The charter guys are out there every day. They fish with methods that are highly effective, whether they're what you or I like to do or not. They catch a lot more fish than we do. They're much more effective than we are. So I'm not even sure if I believe the percentages here. Now, that said, some people may feel that it is right for the charter guys to get 2 fish and for other anglers to get 1 fish, and that's fine. That's fine. They're working for a living. I would point out that the boat dealer that sells boats when fishing is good is working for a living too. And the tackle shop owner who sells bait and tackle to you and me, he's working for a living too. But the bottom line is, if you believe that sector separation should be taking place, when you give your input, you should look at options C1 and C2. Now, Fish Talk Magazine as an entity is not going to make a recommendation on this. We're not going to take a position on this. This is a personal decision. I can't tell you the option that I'm inclined towards personally. This is just on a personal level. And that's B3, B4. Okay? And I know some people with a strong conservation mind aren't going to like that. And that's okay. We can agree to disagree here, right? But I really don't like the super tight slots. A 19 to 23, a 19 to 24 is like, sometimes it's like looking for a unicorn. And the problem that I see with it is that we're going to be catching and releasing a lot of fish. Now, I love that. I don't have a problem with that. I think it's great. The problem is the powers that be charge us a 9% mortality rate for every fish we release. I don't believe that's an accurate figure. The study that's based on says in its closing paragraph, do not use this study to calculate coast-wide mortality. Of course, that's exactly what MRIP does. But the study actually says don't do that. They're still going to do it. The bottom line is we don't have a say in that because we don't have the science to say, hey, you know what? In April and May, the release mortality is X. That's what we should be charged with. In July, it's Y. That's what we should be charged with. Or maybe the fishery should just be shut down. The mortality is so high. I don't know. We don't have the studies to prove this. So we can't engage in that conversation. The bottom line is MRIP is going to use that 9% figure. And if we're searching for 19 to 23 inch unicorns, we're going to be charged with that release mortality. And I think from Dave's comment there, that is why it has a higher plus the higher you go on that column. It's more and more fish being released that they calculate as being dead. Dave, please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think that's going to be correct. I am not sure why it's lower in the C options unless they figure that, I don't know, the charters don't throw back those fish. Maybe that's it. That's probably accurate. Most of them do catch and keep. Of course, that now at this point, we got to start distinguishing between charter boats and guides. And then we get into a really convoluted discussion. Who's a charter boat? Who's a guide? What's the difference? What difference do they make in this kind of impact? That's a whole other can of worms. I shouldn't even mention that. Should have kept my mouth shut. All right. So these are the options that we're going to be set up with. Zach, I got to look something up while I do that. If we got any questions, please feel free to let them flow. I don't believe this has been specifically published yet, but it appears that on December 6th, there will be a public input meeting in Annapolis on this very topic, looking at these very options. People, whoever you are right now out there looking at this, if you care, get your calendar and mark down December 6th. I don't have a time for you yet, but that, believe me, we will publicize it when that comes up. And I hope recreational anglers flood the room. I really do. And I hope they give input on these options that is polite and reasonable. You got to remember to be polite and reasonable, because you know what? The people who are actually deciding whether or not to consider the input, if you're a total jerk, they immediately block you out. They don't want to hear it. Who can blame them, right? They don't want to get yelled at. You can't yell at these people. You got to be polite. And they actually do give more weight to well-reasoned and considered positions. I've seen it in action. They actually, after the meeting, they'll be like, the guy in the green hat, he actually had a really good point about XYZ. They actually really do consider that. Mark December 6th on your calendar. Now, I'm going to make an announcement right here, right now. The next Live with Lenny will not take place the first Thursday of December, because that's the day after that meeting. And I really want to get it in before that meeting so we can go back and look at this. We can talk about everything that happened between today and right before the meeting, because you can bet more is going to happen. You can bet a whole bunch more is going to happen. A lot of comments going to occur. So the next Live with Lenny will be Thursday, November 30th. We'll still do it at 6:00. And we'll send out the Facebook announcements and all that stuff. But it's going to go early. We're going to do it early so we can have it before that meeting. December 6th. Remember that date, people. All right. Now, David Sikorsky, if you're still watching, please chime in. Tell me where I went wrong. I think I didn't go off the rails. I think I covered everything properly and accurately. Oh, here, look, he was waiting. He couldn't type that fast. He was already in there. There is science that shows variable mortality levels with catch and release depending on water and air temperatures and where they're hooked. MassDMF, that's Massachusetts, is doing some other studies right now. The reality is the management plan uses 9, but states can and should use different numbers. Maryland should be leading efforts to better manage on a local scale. In fact, our community wrote a report on rec data that recommended for them to prioritize Chesapeake Bay scale management. So I got a couple responses to that, David. The first is I've been screaming for that since Fish Talk has been in existence. In 2018, I was begging them to do more studies on this. That's the first thing. And nobody's listened. Everybody, please join in the begging. Maybe if we beg more and beg louder, they'll listen. We should be doing those studies. Last year, the state of Maryland had a budget surplus. You know how much money went to studying this? Poof, right? So I guess we need to shout that louder. The second thing is we do have some studies regarding this. We have the studies done years ago up on the flats from 92, I think. I know there's some other studies, and I know they're old. I understand that, but they show very different release mortality rates depending on water temperature, depending on salinity. And I don't know why the state, although they're old, I don't know why the state doesn't use them. Maybe somebody out there does. But I don't believe they're used in any way, shape, or form at this point, although they were used for the conservation equivalency that Maryland took for using circle hooks, right? When they banned all the J hooks, circle hooks only for rockfish, which honestly, I personally do not believe the results bared out the concept. I don't think it really had the effect they thought it would have. Herb saying we should ban treble hooks too. Herb, I'm with you, man. I got no problem getting rid of trebles. Rich is saying also bait. You know, that may be a consideration. That would upset a lot of people who live line. And so I pause before I say, yeah, that's a good idea. But maybe it is. You know, maybe we need to do something like that. It certainly would cut down on the gut hook fish. And, you know, for the first time ever, I think it was last year, so many spot were going into bait tanks that they actually put a number on a limit on the number of spot you could take, which has never happened before. Mike saying, can we drop trophy season for a couple of years and see how the needle moves? All right, Mike. So here's the deal with trophy season. The Sport Fishing Advisory Committee recommended to DNR on a unanimous basis that they get rid of it for 2024. The DNR has not taken action yet. We're kind of in wait and see mode on this. Personally, I'd be really surprised if they keep the trophy season. The vast majority of the people out there want to see it go. And even most of the charter boat captains at this point are like, yeah, you know what? Forget about it. They're not catching tons of fish. They don't have happy parties. And they've already lost the money that they used to have from that season. I'm sure that's not all of them. I'm sure some of them don't want to see it go. But the outcry that you would have seen 5 years ago from knocking out the trophy season is not likely to happen anymore. Now, the big problem here is, and personally, I think that's a good idea. I think it's nuts to even consider having a trophy season at this point. You know, I don't see anything wrong with having a April or May timeframe when we can catch small fish, but to catch those big breeders just seems nutty. Now, here's the problem. Looking at how the needle moves, we already know. We already know from looking at the Young of the Year index that over the past 5 years, the whole trophy season thing is irrelevant because fish are dropping eggs. They're just not turning into baby rockfish. Or if they are, they're getting eaten or they're not surviving. So we can have 5 times more big fish come into the bay next year and spawn. And when we're looking at results like this, it's not going to help. It's really not going to change anything. We have bigger problems than just the trophy season is what I'm trying to get at. Do I think it should go? Yeah, I think it should go. Do I think it'll solve this problem? Do I think it'll move this needle? I'm afraid it probably won't. I'm like scared about that. But that's kind of, you know, where I sit on that. And again, I'm going to remind everybody, I'm not a scientist. I can only tell you what I see, what I think. But I have the feeling that most of the scientific types would probably say, when we have young of year indexes like this, the problem is probably not uh, relative to the trophy season. There's something else going on. Carl's saying, how about an extended summer closure? Carl, I was surprised that we didn't see that offered up amongst the options. I thought we might see, no more July, no half of August, something like that. And maybe open up, a week in May or 2 weeks in May to smaller fish, right, in the open bay. And you got to figure that would have a big impact on the release mortality. Now, there are some big problems with that. One of the biggest is that an awful lot of people fish during the summer. And for most of the folks, call it from the Bay Bridge north, just as a general rule of thumb, rockfish is what they got. They really don't have anything else to fish for. Catfish, perch, but rockfish is the main fish. And a big part of the problem there is during the summertime, kids are off of school. And families who like to fish together, that's kind of their time to go. And if you knock out rockfish, you're telling a lot of those people, sorry, but that really stinks. Now, I'm not arguing against a summer closure. I'm just saying this is a consideration, that we should keep in mind. I did think we were going to see summer closures or bigger summer closures put up there along with the options. I don't know how it would shake out, but let's just say for the sake of argument, let's just say that the month of July was closed. The number of fish that would not be taken out of the water might allow for, an enlargement of the slot. If it had to be 19 to 25, maybe that would make it 19 to 26. Maybe it could make it 19 to 27. I don't know. I don't know how those numbers shake out. But I thought that would be among the options. I'm not sure why they weren't put out there. And we'll have to see what happens moving forward. We may end up losing pieces of the season anyway for other reasons as time goes on if we don't see any improvement here. We really need to see an improvement. Matthew's asking, are the only proposed changes for the Chesapeake? David, I'm going to ask you to chime in on this because you know about this a lot better than I do, but I do believe the different measures are happening coast-wide. There are different measures happening coast-wide. Coast-wide has already taken a hit to go to the micro slot, 28 to 31. And part of the issue that we deal with here is we're really the only ones on the Chesapeake Bay here who harvest these smaller fish. Most of the other states up and down the coast don't. They're harvesting larger fish. Now, we have resident fish here, right? And they're mostly males, and they're mostly 26 inches and under. They're almost entirely 31 and under. So, we have a different way of calculating. I want to mention, and I'm very sorry I forgot to mention this earlier, all those options we were looking at before, thank you, Zach, they all relate to Chesapeake Bay recreational options. So this is talking about sort of combining Maryland, Virginia, and the PRFC for the Potomac River. This is kind of where everybody would be falling in. So it would no longer be chunking out the different sections of the bay. Which, if we didn't have the whole conservation equivalency thing, is probably, more or less what it would have been like in the first place. Maryland juggled a lot of those conservation equivalency balls in order to have a longer fishing season, in order to keep the trophy season, honestly, some years ago. I'm going back some years now. Any word on coastal reg changes? I don't believe so. David, if I'm wrong, please chime in there. I think they are looking at a commercial cut, but recreational, no. Here we go. Thank you, David. There's science that shows, oh, wait, what happened? It popped up and then it went away. I don't know what happened. Zach, can we get that back? Oh, here we go. Oh, no, that's Bayfish. I'm a board member of CCA Maryland. As a note to my involvement, if you're a recreational fisherman, it's very important that each fisherman join CCA if you want a voice in the legislature. God, yes. CCA Maryland is currently 2,000 plus members to have a real voice in the political realm. To have their attention as a force be dealt with. As a point of reference, MSSA had over 7,000. So 1,000% correct. I said it on the last live with Lenny, and we got some new members. And I want to thank you people who joined. Like a half a dozen people joined. That was great. Everybody, if you care about this stuff, you're nuts if you're not a member of CCA. They are your only voice at the table. MSSA is long dead. There is no other recreational angler seat at the table when this stuff is being discussed within the state of Maryland. And I think more or less in Virginia too. I may have that wrong. Virginia does have a Saltwater Sportsmen's Association. I don't know how big and potent it is. But yeah, absolutely. Everyone needs to be a CCA member. So Zach, meanwhile, we lost David's comment. I hope we can get it back up because I don't know what the heck he said. But it probably was smarter than what I said. Probably. That's what I'm guessing. No, we can't get it back. We lost it somewhere. All right. Well,
it was just a repeat. It was my mistake.
Oh, okay. I got you. Thank you, Zach. All right.
But as you can see, ccamd.org/join. That's the URL. All right. We have lots of thoughts, lots of questions.
Now, have we had anyone take us up on the Bryan Point Outfitters hunt trip?
No, but it's a good time to bring that back up.
Oh my gosh, people are running out of time. You got 3 minutes. $800 for a kick butt goose hunt for 4 people. Come on. Who out there doesn't have $200 and 3 friends who want to go goose hunting with them on a guided hunt at a place where the geese are going to dive bomb you? Come on. I can't believe this didn't go this year. This one boggles my mind. And remember, that money is going to Fish for a Cure. Come on, people. 800. Almost down to 2 minutes. I can't believe no one's taken us up on it.
All right, if you're watching this in post or having a thought later, you have 24 hours to email Lenny at Fish Talk Mag and tell him you want the goose hunt for 4, and he'll give you instructions on what to do from there. So anyone watching this in post, you have until Friday, November the 3rd at 5 p.m. or around about to.
All right, we'll extend one more time if no one jumps in the next minute and a half. But we are about out of time, people. Zach, do we have any other really good questions that we haven't managed to get to yet? Or we just have are you just overloaded?
I mean, there's lots of great conversations going on in the comments. I don't see any specific questions per se. Actually, here's one. How about
no catch and release or barbless for a few seasons? I don't know how you can have a no catch CNR catch and release, right? I don't know how you can have no catch and release. Because even if you're not fishing for the fish, you're going to catch them. I think you probably mean catch your limit and then you're done fishing for those fish, right? Which honestly, I think at this point, the vast majority of people do anyway. And I'm not sure how they would enforce that. It would be a toughie. Barbless, maybe that should be talked about. That's another item where we need a study that tells us, it has X impact on the fish. And I'll tell you, I know a lot of really dedicated anglers who they take their pliers and crimp the barb down on the hooks. That's definitely makes it a heck of a lot easier to get the hook out of the fish and let it go, without doing any damage. No question.
Kevin's asking,
reducing the number of charter licenses instead of lapse and miso, maybe reduce the numbers gradually. I can't tell you that I'm really familiar with how that works. And B, I don't know if it's really a great thought to cut down the number of charter guys. Because like I said before, the charter guys, they play an important role in the recreational fishing community, whether you want to admit it or not. They absolutely do. They get new people out fishing. They have big boats. Not everybody can afford a big boat. They take out people who maybe don't have a lot of success, and they teach them sometimes, some charters teach them how to have success. They allow people to take out, maybe they have a 18-footer. They're not going to take their 4-year-old on. They allow them to take their 4-year-old fishing. I don't think, it's just my opinion, but I'm not sure I would want to see the number of charters reduced. Now, I've had the same thought on commercials. Maybe we should have fewer commercial fishermen out there. But then you run into the argument of, well, those people are sending the fish to the fish market. So the people who don't have boats and don't go fishing can eat fish. And that's a valid argument. So I don't know where to go with that one either. Rich is saying, what about pound nets? I think historically it's been recognized that the pound nets aren't a major contributor to the catch. I don't know what the ratio of gill net caught rockfish versus pound net caught rockfish is. And I might be wrong about that, but I don't commonly hear that brought up as a really problematic one. I think those guys end up catching a whole lot more bunker, which end up in our bait shops, by the way. Matthew is asking any changes to commercial regs. Those options, I believe, are predicated on a 14.5% cut in the Chesapeake Bay harvest, which isn't really a cut. It's a cut to the limit, but it's based on 2022 numbers. And in 2022, the commercial guys in the Bay came up short. They were 14.5% short of their cap, which ought to tell you something, because they're pretty dang good at catching fish too. And if they came up short, that's kind of like a red flag right there. Okay, so it's all fisheries. Dave's saying all fisheries coastwide are considered for up to a 14.5% reduction. The range for commercial is 0 to 14.5%. Recreational options laid out with a percent of each in the document. You may notice it's going to be hard to hit the mark. Yeah, it sure is. It certainly is. It certainly is. And all this stuff, honestly, there's so much to it. It makes my head spin. I've been trying really hard to get a handle on this. We just got a hold of these options yesterday. So everyone, please forgive me if I screwed something up somewhere along the way. I'm sure I did. But I had very little time to check these out before we got here. Previously, I had been working with a months-old document. So, man, my head's spinning. My head's spinning. I'll bet everyone's is. Zach, is your head spinning?
Yes.
It is a head spinner.
Well, I think we're just about out of time. There's a ton of great comments. I think both Kevin McMenamin of the Annapolis Anglers Club and Dave Skorsky of CCA, thanks for sharing the ASMFC links in the comments. So if you'd like to educate yourself, you guys can find those there. And, you can send comment to Lenny. We have our letter section in the magazine each month. I think it's going to be pretty chock full here for the next couple months as these regulations pan out.
It is.
And I just want to remind everyone to check our fishing reports and sign up for our email if you're not getting those. Lenny gets those published. Lenny and Dylan do a tremendous amount of work to produce up and down.
Yes, it is.
Day, and they are live every Friday by noon. And Lenny prides himself; he's never missed a Friday.
It's true. It's crazy, but it's true. Knock on wood. It hasn't happened in over 6.5 years. And I'll take the opportunity to thank Dylan. Dylan Wooders, our reports editor, just does a fabulous job. He gathers all the intel. He sends it up to me for an edit and a post. And man, he does a spectacular job. I want to leave everybody with 2 quick things tonight. Okay. I know we're over time. 2 quick things. First off, don't forget what we said about CCA. It is absolutely true. If you can buy a bag of bloodworms in this day and age, you can shell out the pittance of money to join CCA and add your voice to the recreational fisherman's seat at the table. That's number 1. Number 2, please don't forget that December 6th date. And if you can't make it, give your input in writing. It still counts. And I know, believe me, I feel your pain. Oftentimes we get ignored. Even when we give good reasoned input, we get ignored. But believe me, if you don't give it, then the powers that be will never take it under consideration. If you give it, and if it's polite and well reasoned, it at least is in their minds. It at least gets talked about. It at least gets thought about. It's a whole lot better than doing nothing. So please either be there December 6th or give your input. I believe that meeting will be in Annapolis, by the way. But I think at the church probably, but I don't know for sure. We'll be updating on that. But give that written input too. It is critical. And thank you everybody for tuning in tonight.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.